We're reading from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 15 to 27. Then he returned to the man of God, he and all his company, and he came and stood before him. And he said, Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. So accept now a present from your servant. But he said, As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will receive none. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Then Naaman said, If not, please let there be given to your servant 2 mule loads of earth. For from now on your servant will not offer burnt offering or sacrifice to any god but the Lord. In this matter may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, leaning on my arm, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter. He said to him, Go in peace. But when Naaman had gone from him a short distance, Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said, See, my master has spared this Naaman the Syrian, in not accepting from his hand what he brought. As the Lord lives, I will run after him and get something from him. So Gehazi followed Naaman, and when Naaman saw someone running after him, he got down from the chariot to meet him and said, Is all well? And he said, All is well. My master has sent me to say, There have just now come to me from the hill country of Ephraim 2 young men of the sons of the prophets. Please give them a talent of silver and 2 changes of clothing. And Naaman said, Be pleased to accept 2 talents. And he urged him and tied up 2 talents of silver in 2 bags with 2 changes of clothing, and laid them on 2 of his servants. And they carried them before Gehazi. And when he came to the hill, he took them from their hand and put them in the house. And he sent the men away, and they departed. He went in and stood before his master, and Elisha said to him, Where have you been, Gehazi? And he said, Your servant went nowhere. But he said to him, Did not my heart go when the man turned from his chariot to meet you? Was it a time to accept money and garments, olive orchards and vineyards, sheep and oxen, male servants and female servants? Therefore the leprosy of Naaman shall cling to you and to your descendants forever. So he went out from his presence, a leper like snow. The story of Naaman, a foreigner, miraculously healed of leprosy, contrasts strikingly with Gehazi, a servant of the prophet Elisha. Naaman, after being healed, gratefully returned to Elisha to acknowledge the God of Israel's greatness. He was eager to thank Elisha with gifts, but Elisha refused to accept them, illustrating that God's grace and healing are not for sale. This contrast reveals 2 hearts, one transformed by grace and the other ensnared by greed. Naaman's gratitude and recognition of Israel's God remind us of another healed leper in the New Testament. In Luke 17, only one of the 10 lepers healed by Jesus returned to give thanks. Jesus commended him, saying, Rise and go, your faith has made you well. Similarly, Naaman's healing transcended physical restoration. It led him to the knowledge of the true God. His grateful response stands in contrast to Gehazi's deception and greed. Though Gehazi lived in close proximity to God's prophet and witnessed countless miracles, his heart was far from trusting in the God he served. Naaman came to Israel expecting that his wealth and influence might secure his healing. laden with gifts and a recommendation from the Syrian king. He likely believed that his resources would help him gain favor. Yet Elisha rejected all offers of wealth, nor was he impressed by his position, demonstrating that God's healing was a gift of grace, not a commodity to be bought. In our own lives, salvation, the most precious gift of all, is free to anyone who calls on the name of the Lord. When Naaman pledged to worship only God of Israel, he also showed his desire to live righteously. He asked Elisha for pardon in one area, that he would need to accompany his master, the Syrian king, into the temple of Rimmon, a pagan god. In humility, Naaman sought to honor the true God despite the expectations of his pagan culture. Elisha's response, "Go in peace," showed trust in Naaman's sincerity. Naaman's newfound reverence for God highlighted his understanding that worship is a matter of the heart, and knowledge Gehazi lacked. Gehazi had witnessed Elisha's miracles firsthand. He saw the resurrection of the Shunammite's son and knew that God revealed even the secret thoughts of powerful kings to Elisha. Yet Gehazi's heart was gripped by greed. As he watched Naaman depart with treasures, his desire for wealth overtook his respect for his master and his reverence for God. Gehazi secretly followed Naaman, fabricating a story to obtain silver and clothing. Naaman, unaware of the deceit, willingly provided the gifts. When Gehazi returned, he tried to conceal his actions, but Elisha confronted him. "Did not my heart go with you when the man turned from his chariot to meet you?" Gehazi's dishonesty and greed had led him to act against the very principles he witnessed in Elisha's life. God's provision during times of famine had clearly demonstrated that Elisha trusted fully in God. Gehazi's desire for worldly wealth and status clouded his judgment, leading him to lie and scheme in secret, thinking his actions would go unnoticed. The Bible offers many warnings against harboring greed. Gehazi's story echoes the account of Achan in Israel history, a man whose secret greed brought devastating consequences. As Proverbs 4:23 advises, "Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life." Greed, if left unchecked, distorts our hearts and erodes our integrity, leading to greater and more destructive sins. Gehazi's tragedy was that he was so near to God's power, yet so far from grasping his character. Like the elder brother in Jesus' parable of the prodigal son, who could not celebrate his lost brother's return, Gehazi's heart was hardened. Though he served one of God's mightiest prophets, he lacked a genuine relationship with God. Gehazi's closeness to Elisha and the miracles he witnessed did not transform his heart, revealing a sobering truth. Proximity to godly people does not guarantee a godly heart. The Bible warns us against the deceptive pull of material wealth. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income." Greed is relentless and insatiable. It always craves more. Jesus cautioned against this when he said, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. A man's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." Luke 12:15. He then shared the parable of a wealthy man whose life revolved around storing up riches, only to be called a fool by God because he valued his wealth over his soul. Gehazi's example is a reminder of the danger of letting greed rule our lives. Jesus pointedly stated, You cannot serve both God and mammon, highlighting that material wealth, not just the devil, can vie for our devotion. Just as Gehazi's greed led him to deceive and disobey, unchecked desires for wealth or status can lead us astray. Gehazi's leprosy was a physical manifestation of the inner corruption that consumed him, serving as a stark reminder that spiritual decay often has real-life consequences. Gehazi's leprosy became a lasting symbol of his actions, a mark of the distance between his heart and God's righteousness. He was near to Elisha and saw miracles firsthand, but he was spiritually distant from the God who performed them. Let us learn from Gehazi's fall, guarding our hearts against the subtle allure of greed and cultivating a genuine relationship with God. In our own lives, we must be vigilant against the temptation to serve wealth, status, or possessions above our devotion to God. We are called to seek a heart that is near to God, full of gratitude and reverence, like Naaman's, rather than one distracted by the empty promises of material gain. God bless you.